Assalamu alaikum viewers. I'm your host Asfandiar Kasuri, reporting to you from the Rayburn Building on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. My guest today is Congressman Dennis Kucinich of Ohio. He is a two-time presidential candidate and a leading anti-war voice on the Hill. Congressman, thank you for being with us.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Congressman, during the 2008 presidential election, which you contested, you were asked by Wolf Blitzer in one of the many debates that took place if you would support Senator Obama or Senator Clinton if they received the nomination. You said you would support them if they refused to use war as an instrument of policy. So I ask you now, Congressman, do you support President Obama?
I have not voted for any bill that has come through the Congress which provides funding for war. Sometimes I've been one of the few individuals in the Congress who's taken that position. To the extent that the Obama administration has made further requests for funding for Iraq and Afghanistan and other military options or adventures, I don't support that at all.
Congressman, the generals are clearly looking to escalate the war in Afghanistan. First of all, where do these troops come from, given the fact that the U.S. Military is stretched so thin? And secondly, do you agree with the idea of escalating this war effort?
I'm opposed to any escalation of the war. I think that we're going in the wrong direction in Afghanistan. We should be bringing our troops home. Our occupation in Afghanistan has understandably fueled an insurgency. People are not going to tolerate the presence of foreign troops in their land, and that's always been true in Afghanistan. It's true. It was true of the Russians. It's true of the British. It's true of the United States. We have to get out, and so sending more troops out of the question. Where are they going to come from? They'll probably transfer a good number of them from operations in Iraq, but they'll also bring more in from other places around the world.
But many in this administration say that if you withdraw from Afghanistan, America's worst fears may be realized, perhaps even nuclear war in South Asia. To what extent do you believe that the Taliban and Islamic extremism is an existential threat to the United States?
Well, we certainly need to do everything we can to address the nuclear issues, because if the trajectory of this discussion ends with a concern over the security of nuclear weapons, that ought to be a concern of the world community. Here in the United States, I advocate that the United States lead the way towards nuclear abolition. And I've been long active on this issue. I represent a group of parliamentarians at the UN on this question. I met with Ban Ki-moon a couple of weeks ago on this question of nuclear disarmament leading towards abolition. So certainly we should be concerned about what goes on in the Asian subcontinent, particularly with respect to the relationship between India and Pakistan, both great and powerful nations which possess the ability to engage in massive destruction. We have to be engaged in that. It does not follow that through having an occupation in Afghanistan that we are somehow creating more stability. I would argue that we create less stability by the counterinsurgency strategy that has been executed and that General McChrystal would favor accelerating.
Of course, Congressman Kucinich, President Obama has said that this is a battle for the hearts and minds of Pakistanis and Afghans. As you may or may not know, the Pakistani and Afghani people mistrust the United States just about as much as they do the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. What do you believe, Congressman, are the reasons for this mistrust?
Well, let's go back to the spring of 2004 and the missile strikes in Waziristan, the missile strike on a little village called Damadola. People were minding their own business, and suddenly out of nowhere, a drone fires a missile that kills a lot of innocent people. I think that the drone attacks have done more to undermine trust than anything else we could do. People have to feel secure. And if we've made ourselves the arbiter of who lives and who dies in Waziristan and along the border, that's a heavy responsibility. And what comes with that responsibility is having to suffer the consequences of taking the lives of innocent people. And there's been a lot of innocent people whose lives have been lost because of this policy. And so, you know, as a consequence, there's been a great objection from the people of Pakistan to the use of drones. And I agree with them.
So, Congressman, why does President Obama insist on these drone missile strikes? I mean, it is clear that these strikes are causing extremism, or rather increasing the radicalization of the local populations. What are all these PhDs in Washington thinking? What is the mindset here?
Having a higher education doesn't necessarily make anyone smarter. As a matter of fact, my father never went beyond the 8th grade, but he was a very wise man. He respected other people. He knew that you could not impose your will on other people. And he did not have to go to college to learn that. We have individuals in our government who see the globe as a game board that you move players around on. And they don't necessarily think about the people who have to pay the price for the policies. That's why when you think of drones, for some it could be like a video game, because they're not actually present. It's really the height of irresponsibility to be able to push a button, and, you know, thousands of miles away, and literally zap someone off the face of the earth, and then go back home and have your dinner. I mean, we need to think about the moral consequences of the technologies that we use, which is the same reason why we need to move to get rid of nuclear weapons. If we think that drones are a substitute for diplomacy, we're wrong. Diplomacy is a very tough order here, especially when occupation fuels insurgencies. The occupation in Iraq fueled an insurgency. The occupation in Afghanistan's fueling an insurgency. The attacks in the federally administered tribal areas are fueling an insurgency, especially where the United States is involved. The drone attacks help to fuel an insurgency. So we have to start asking ourselves, are we really contemplating the effects of what it is that we do in terms of our policies, in terms of our military action? This is a philosophical problem in my own country, in the United States. Because while we have great power, we don't always think about measuring the consequences of the use of that power, which is why there's not much discussion about the loss of over 1 million Iraqi lives in the course of the Iraq War, a war that was based on lies, which is why there hasn't been much discussion about the loss of countless lives of the people in Afghanistan, about the loss of many lives along the border and the loss of lives in Pakistan. We really have to start thinking about that. We have to start seeing these things in human terms. Because if we fail to see them in human terms, and we only see them in technological terms, we lose our own humanity.